All right. Hi. Sorry again that the Skype session didn't work. I'll just go through the whole project, my thoughts again, so you can just, relate to it, and I hope I hope this will be helpful for you. So, like I said, I always start with putting the tracks into groups. Like I said, I pull the kick and the bass into the same group. All the drums, like all the percussive instruments, shakers, hi hats, whatever. I group the melodic content together, like keys, guitars, whatever is melodic. And then usually I have a vocal bus for all vocal recordings, and then an effects bus for uplifts, downlifts, atmospheres, everything that is not tonal and is just behind the track or adding something to transitions and so on. And then I have references. Of course, important here is that it's going to external out and not into the master because you don't want to master your reference tracks again. So what I did here, like I said, your kick drum, I felt this kick was too light, so I boosted it. This is your kick right now. And I just added drum bus to it with the boom. You know, like I said, you set up the frequency of usually the root note of the track of the key of your track, so it's A sharp in this case. I decrease the decay so it's not like a boomy 808, and it should feel more like a kick drum. And then I cut some lows out. Cut it around the 200 hertz area. You can hear that. And boosted some of the frequencies around the 3K area just to get the top end right, to let it peak out more, and so it's the kick is audible in the mix on small speakers. And then again, the soft clipper, I'm going to send you this tool. It's just adding so much weight, so much power. Also a little bit of distortion, but that I really like that distortion. And then I went to the bass. So this is your bass here, and we already discussed this. I also, what I did is usually all my tracks are at minus 6 dB, so I make sure that I have enough headroom. But the kick drum, I lowered it. I'm going to explain how much in a second. Just the bass, like we said, I'm I'm reducing the root frequency that I boosted in the kick. I reduced it in the bass. Added some harmonic compression with the press work, like we said. And then came the Renaissance X. That's like kind of limiter. A really simple tool. You just have an attack, threshold, and gain. And I just wanted to make sure that the bass notes are really equal in loudness, equal in power, and that's what I'm always aiming for. You can have dynamics in the hi hats and also in the guitars or whatever, but your bass and your low end should be really solid. Should don't have too much of dynamic going on. In, of course, if you want to have a groove and have a quiet kick drum and then a loud one, do that. But especially for the bass, I want that every note is present, is audible in the mix. So I use the limiter. And then what I just did is sidechain it to the kick drum. I set up the ratio to infinity to 1, so it's really cutting it. I set the attack to 0.01 milliseconds, release to auto. That's really the best thing you could do because it's automatically setting up the right release time for your kick drum, so you don't have to figure it out by yourself. It's working really, really well. And then the look ahead, that's basically your compressor is looking ahead what is coming, and then pre-calculates what it has to do. It's just a cleaner way to sidechain it, and you don't have too many clicks going on. So yeah. And what I said, I reduced the kick drum because I'm always aiming for, when I listen to the spectrum, I'm always listening that the bass and the kick have equal loudness. So you see, they both have the same loudness. If I had it to minus 6 dB, like the normal volume, it's just too loud. So that's what I did with the bass, and then I kind of wanted to help you make the bass stand out more in the on small speakers. So I added the upper harmonic and just, duplicated the whole track and pitched it up a whole octave. And it's kind of like the same processing, just that I have an EQ after the limiter that is really narrow and only aims for the upper harmonic. It doesn't really sound really good in itself, but the bass is really, it just has those upper harmonics. I tried a lot with distortion, but I couldn't get it going. I didn't like the sound of it with distortion, so I just went to duplicate the track, added an octave, and that's what I did with your bass. And then the processing on the kick and bass is, again, I cut out the really low frequencies like 36 hertz. I have some glue compression going on with the longest attack time possible, and also release time set to auto, because you have sometimes bass going on, sometimes not, and the compressor is adjusting itself to the content. And the limiter is doing nothing at all. That's just the limiter is just here in case those tracks really peak, that the limiter is not giving those peaks to the master bus. It's just like an insurance, kind of like. But yeah, this is your kick and bass processing. For I'm going for maybe a 1 or 2 dB in gain reduction on those buses. Not much, just to glue them together, give them more punch. And yeah, that's it. For the drums, I did some more balancing volume wise. I felt like your mix was had two less high frequencies. So when I listen to your mastering, sorry about that. So I felt like I needed more highs, so I boosted the hats quite a bit and kind of pushed them into stereo field. So the high, I usually go for for left. I don't know why I like it, but hi-hats are on the left, and those little ones are a little bit more to the left than those, the main. I usually cut the lows out of it just to have as much space as possible in the low end. Yeah, and then that's it for the hi-hats. I did that with all the tracks where I felt like I needed to cut some lows. Those shakers are on the right. Shakers always go to the right on my tracks. I don't know why that is. I like your percussions. I boosted those percussions here. Also because of the high frequency content going on there. And yeah, those drums really were easy to mix. The snare has some processing. I added this erosion plugin. It's also an Ableton plugin, and what it does, it just adds noise to the signal. You can add the frequency where it should add noise, the width, how much, beside the frequency you set here, and the amount, of course. So, and I just did that to give it a little bit more, around 4 to, I don't know, 7-8K hertz is where the human ear is the most sensible, and all frequencies going on here are really present and kind of pleasant to the ear, and I wanted to snare to sit a little bit more there. So just to have a little bit more high end going on. And then again, I have the soft clipper. I usually have the soft clipper on the snare and on the kick because those are really peeking into the master bus, and I don't want that. So this is your snare without and with. It's not much, but it's kind of limiting it. I also, pushed it to the side, just 2 points to the right, like a drummer has the snare. Also, I felt like he has it on the right, but I'm not a drummer. But I don't know. I liked it on the right side. Then I have some Fairchild compression going on. Just 1 dB. This compressor is from Universal Audio. Really cool company. You need a special device to use them, but they're really sound really good. And also, again, here's the soft clipper. Probably that's why you couldn't hear or couldn't see a big difference. Yeah. So the soft clipper is essentially, just grabbing the peaks and distorting them in a pleasant way. So that's what I did with your drum bus. I sent it to my own drum reverb. That's a Valhalla room. Yeah, just 1 second reverb. I used to calculate what pre-delay works best. I'm going to send you this website called Nick Fever. This is a delay calculator where you can, you enter your BPM, that's 148, and then it tells you, okay, 25.3 milliseconds are 1/16. It's not, but it's telling you the rhythmic times, and I just did that for the pre-delay, so it kind of sits in the rhythm. And then I did some side chaining, the same I have on the kick and bass except for the ratio, that every time the snare comes, the reverb gets a little bit quieter. And yeah. And if you have sidechaining at the end of a return channel, it's important that, or at least I do this, I, go into the send with the maximum amount and then lower the volume of the whole send. So you just have to set the compressor once instead of pushing around this and then going back to the compressor and setting this up again. It's just easier to work with. For your drums, I also used your drum reverb because it was kind of a different one. And also sidechained it to the kick. This is doing nothing at all. So yeah, so every time the kick comes, the drum verb is pushed down. Oh, sorry. It does something. Yeah, it's also triggered by the input. So by this drum bus, it's also triggered. So your drum bus is also. It's also going down when the snare comes, etc. Going to the synth bus, I did some balancing, like the twinkle, also reduced the low end and just the low end on many tracks. I compressed the keys a little bit because I felt like they could use some. That's the Pro C2. It's not doing too much here. I reduced a little bit of the 300 hertz because those are kind of like the frequencies that kind of problematic. It gets too muddy too fast. And I sent some of the tracks into my longer reverb return channel just because to have them sit more in the back of the mix. That's the Arts Acoustic. It's a really good sounding reverb. I did some EQing here. So the what I told you, those mid frequencies don't add up in the reverb, so I cut it out and also cut some of the highs because you don't want those nasty high frequencies in the reverb. And it's sidechained to the kick and snare, so the reverb stays rhythmic. Of course, you need. Yeah, that's what I did. Essentially, I boosted those main keys because I felt like you need more mid informations. And the most processing I do with melodic content, if I don't do sound design, if I do mixing, is on the bus itself. So I do some compression again with the glue compressor, really cool tool. Again, aiming for maybe 3 to 4 dB gain reduction. Then I have this SSL channel. It's also from Waves. Really cool, really popular tool in all kinds of genres. And this is where I boosted all the frequencies from 8K upwards by 4 dB. So just to have a little bit more brilliance, and also I added some boost at 200 hertz to add more weight to it. Then again, the FabFilter is just the just the insurance, and then I did some side chaining to the snare and the kick, so those two elements stand out in the mix. Whatever happens, they just pop through it. Um, just some main advice. I usually do cuts before the compressor and boosts after the compressor. Usually. Yeah, this is what I did here on the individual tracks and those buses. And let's see the mastering chain. So this is the Fab Filter Pro Q3, and this is what I like about the Fab Filter. What I forgot to mention, always set those to linear phase when you're mixing, because if you have zero latency, there could be some phase issues around the frequency you set the EQ bands. So make sure you have linear phase. You have more latency going on, but if you're mixing, it doesn't really matter. And what I did here is I cut it some low end here. I cut it on the side signal. I cut the low end because you don't want any sub frequencies on the sides in the stereo field, but you didn't have too much going on there. You really need to turn it on, turn on the volume to hear it. I'm going to turn this off, so turn your volume down, please. And then what's cool about this plugin is you can see the peaks, and just kind of reduce the peaks exactly where you want. So you see, all right, this frequency is peaking, so I grab it and I can cut it or boost it. So this is what I did on the mastering. This is usually, I always start with EQ, clean this mix up. Go for not too much dB, maybe 1, maximum 2 dB. If you need to do more, go back to the track, go back to the mixing, but in the mastering, I just try to clean up the mix. Then comes parallel compression, a glue compressor again, maximum attack, minimum release, maximum rate, ratio, and just push the threshold. It sounded really awful. And then reduce the dry and wet. So you get the compressed signal and the uncompressed signal. You get the best from both worlds. Really recommended, really popular technique. I use it a lot. The Wolf compressor, like you said, is also like a parallel compressor. So I set up the compression to 100 and turned down the dry and wet to 9%, and had this lo-fi button at 19. I was thinking that this was nice. Then comes the Ozone. This is a really cool plugin. This is part of the Ozone mastering suite, but this is just the equalizer. And what you can do here is, you can use it as a normal equalizer, like with 8 bands, but you can click matching and match the input signal to a target curve. And you have pink noise here, and pink noise is, I think it's pink noise is moduled after the human ear, like how you could hear. Anyway, pink noise is a really cool target curve, and you can just let this tool listen to your mix, say that it wants to match the curves of your source to the target, to the pink noise curve. You can also add some custom curves, whatever. What I did. Oh. And then the equalizer sets every frequency so it matches the pink noise, and you could, of course, really go for it, but just a small amount usually helps. kind of flattens out your frequencies and makes it sound really, really cool on small speakers, on big speakers. Yeah, you know, it controls if you have too many lows, too less highs, too many highs, too less lows, and so on. Then the chroma tape, you have this tool as well. Maybe go for 1 or 2 maximum. I turn down the flux parameter always to 0 and don't use the rest. Then comes the Elysia Alpha compressor. This is also used for soft clipping. And then at the end, just the FabFilter Pro L2. You know, just regular stuff going on and sorry. You need to turn down your volume again. And it's aiming for the right loops. And after all that, I have this FPS scope on. I see one trick I always do is, and I can show you this. I have this utility tool right at the end, after everything. And it's going down, it's reducing just 2 dBs right before, I call it the drop, right before the drums hit. And you know, you get this really cool pumping effect, like it's getting a little quieter, and this way you have a much bigger impact. And I did this for both, you know, drop parts. What I also saw in a video of yours is that you automated the track volume here. I would always recommend having a utility tool on your track and using the gain here. Sorry. Because otherwise, if you want to change the volume of something, you have to go back or change the automation. Don't do that. Have an automation ready here, and then you can play around with the master fader here. It's just easier to use. Always for the limiter, I always aim for minus 0.3 dB at the output. Just to make sure that, of course, this is true peak limiting, but sometimes some devices have problems with your tracks if you just limit it to 0.0 dB. So always go minus 0.3 works best. And yeah, that should be it. This is I just have an automation here to copy your effect. You know, that the volume goes up, but the reverb is already in the mix. Yeah, that's almost 30 minutes of content. I hope that helps. Ask your questions. I hope to answer them well. I hope you could understand me. I'm of course not a native speaker, but yeah, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for working with me. I had a good time working on your track. You have a really cool sound. I'm excited for this new track, and I hope this was helpful for you. Cheers, man.